This is the kind of like the panel I suppose I've been most looking forward to mainly because we've got two returning stars of hard working class heroes convention Passam on board. We've also got two new guns to the panel experience here. So basically, I'm just going to, I suppose, like introduce the panelists and then we'll kind of get going. Actually, no, you know what? In order to get people's kind of throats warmed up, we'll start with Darren at the end. Just introduce yourself and what you do. And also just tell me what you were doing 10 years ago.
What year is it? It's 2012, right?
2002.
10 years ago, I'd just exited Sony Music post-merger with BMG. So I was kind of hanging out and just scratching my arse, to be honest. I wasn't doing a whole lot. So that was 10 years ago. Now I run an agency called Motive Unknown. I do online marketing for bands like Alt J, Villagers, Temper Trap, Darwin Dees, kinds of people like that, and I strategize everything that they do online and basically oversee all their fan engagement, fan growth, what services they engage with, you know, how they reach new fans, how they market new initiatives, the whole bit. That's me.
Good, thank you, Darren. Brendan?
Yeah, so my name's Brendan. 10 years ago I was probably doing my junior cert.
That suddenly makes a lot of people here feel very old.
Yeah. I founded a tech startup called Soundwave with two other guys, Aidan and Craig. So just in one sentence, it's a smartphone app. It tracks what songs people are listening to, where they are and when they listen to them. So you can kind of discover new music, see what your friends are playing, see what celebrities are listening to, and see what songs are trending in certain locations all around the world. So there's kind of a strong local aspect to it where you can see kind of literally in this building or in this street what songs are being played around you, but you can also keep an eye on emerging trends globally and see what songs are trending around the world. So that's what we're doing.
Thank you, Brendan. Will?
Hello, I'm Will. 10 years ago, I was a senior in high school in Cupertino, California, and barely graduating from said high school. Now I do a website called Yours Truly, started in San Francisco 3 years ago, and we make short films and documentaries and performance pieces about our favorite bands.
Thank you. Dev?
My name is Dev Sherlock. 10 years ago I was working in the very traditional fields of print journalism and radio. Today I work with a website called The Hype Machine that indexes a little over 800 of the more interesting and influential music blogs in the world. And it's just basically a great resource for music discovery and also for industry to go and see what music blogs are talking about, since music blogs are indeed driving the conversation in many ways today.
Cool, thank you. So like 10 years ago, none of the people on the panel were doing what they were doing right now. 10 years ago, the companies represented here didn't exist. 10 years from now, I mean, a lot of the scenarios that we're going to be talking about here would be totally changed as well. So, I mean, what we're going to actually try to do is kind of, I suppose, talk about what we've learned about tech and tech people in terms of music in the last 10 years. You know, I think over the last 10 years, it would be fair to say that, like, the music industry as such has stopped, would be fair to say, actually, that the music industry has stopped regarding tech people with suspicion. That's become a bit more welcoming and a bit realizing that you're not going to fuck off. You're here for the long haul. Feel free, everyone, to just jump in. Like, it's very, very rambling.
Yeah, I think. Yeah, I think that definitely. I mean, you know, I was at Sony when Napster kind of landed. I was actually working there when they had their best ever year, which I think was '97, and then '98 was their worst ever year, and in between was Napster. So it just, you know, went down the pan. And certainly it's been kind of funny to watch them being so resistive to it. But now I think they've gotten kind of savvy. I think it's a long and deep conversation about how the music industry is playing that game as regards their rights negotiations and, you know, what they expect to you know, for you to get access to their catalogue. But generally, yeah, you know, there is much more of a pro attitude. And I think, to be honest, you know, I mean, I also work slightly outside of the music industry. I work some fashion labels as well. And I have to say, I think everyone's
fashion.
kind of... Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wearing a leather jacket by Dior?
Yeah, you know, Fly 53 if we're going to draw names. But yeah, so working with them, it's kind of funny because I think the music industry has kind of been beaten with the stick of being, you know, completely, you know, against all of this progression. But in fact, when you go beyond it and you look at the movie industry or the publishing industry or other industries, they're way behind. You know, the industry's had to learn very quickly how to adapt. You know, the music industry, and I think when you actually go beyond it, you realise that the music people now are quite some way out in front. You know, we're
Would that-
much more engaging in the way we think about stuff.
But that would be a case as well, like, I mean, Will, the fact that the music industry had no choice. You know, as you just kind of pointed out, Napster landed, and next thing is like, Jesus Christ, deal with this or we're gone.
I think there's good examples and bad examples. I mean, Doug Morris, who was the head of Universal Music for years and years, just was really, really hard with technology. Like, he just didn't get it, didn't want to embrace it at all.
He was, as we could say, he was a man who got his emails printed out.
Yeah, and then you have examples where companies, like the last time I was here on the panel in 2008, I believe I was with a company called iMeme, which was the first kind of like advertising-supported streaming service. And when they entered the market, the labels that they made deals with negotiated such unfair rates for the streaming that it basically crippled the company. And then years and years and years later, Spotify came about and they finally got the mix right of great user interface and good deals with the labels. And if you notice, they launched so much later in the US than they did abroad because they were just waiting, I think, for the right licensing agreements that were sustainable for them to pay and keep their service going. So you have good examples where companies are embracing technology, but I feel like some labels have been backed into a corner and just been like, all right, I guess we have to do this now.
Brendan, I mean, speaking like, I mean, someone who's kind of like, I mean, relatively new to the game in terms of engaging with music, how have you found, you know, like when you're talking are you talking to musicians or are you talking to labels? How have you found them in terms of Soundwave? Or when you hear the horror stories that we're kind of talking about here, is that your experience or is it totally new? Is it totally new age?
It's actually, I haven't really experienced much of that just because as you said, we're new to the game. But all we've found is that every aspect or every sector of the music industry is just hungry for as much information as possible that they can then use to benefit their cause. And I think they see that now technology is a provider of that information, so they can get those insights that they need to fight the new fight. You know, so I think everybody that we've come across with, from you know, solo artists to bands to band managers, labels, agents, everybody has been kind of welcoming and embracing new technology. They also seem to be kind of wary of the old kind of vibe that's out there that they have seen to not being you know, warming towards technology. So they know that they kind of have that image, and they're trying to change that and trying to be more embracing and actually look proactively for emerging technologies that might benefit them in the future, as opposed to closing off their ears and playing blind, you know.
I mean, Dev, with the Hype Machine, I mean, you were kind of like the vanguard of kind of seeing what that change with blogs and seeing that change with music blogs. I mean, when Brendan talks about data and like the amount of data out there and the amount of information, I mean, like maybe talk us through how you kind of like how the Hype Machine like saw that wave changing and how things kind of changed with music blogs in terms of getting more information out there, getting more music out there.
In what respect?
In respect of kind of like, you know, just I suppose how the music blogs had changed media and how you saw that kind of develop.
Well, I mean, I think it changed it across the board. I mean, it changed how labels discovered new music. It just changed how radio programmers and magazine editors and everyone found, you know, what was going to be next, even A&R people. I think from a technological standpoint, I mean, I think music blogs have been a huge part of SoundCloud taking over. Also, you know, it's for a while there it was, oh, all my music's being given away for free. Then there was a time, I mean, we talked about free last year, right, on this stage. And then there was a time where everything was given away for free, and now it's going sort of swinging back toward, you can stream my song, but if you want to own it for your device, you have to go and buy it. That's one big change. You know, I think there's still that cash grab mentality is still happening. There's less money in the industry than there's ever been. So everyone's trying to find the revenue streams, and you know, the copyright holders are the most aggressive on this front. You know, Will talked about how things have changed since the days of iMeme, and we worked together when you were at iMeme a bit. I wasn't at iMeme, I was at another company. But you know, even Pandora today is still, they're spending a lot of money to make that margin that they make. And I think Spotify is spending an awful lot of money as well to make a little bit of money.
Their numbers are out now, and they're actually spending. The more money they're making, the more money they're actually spending on the catalog. So they're losing as they expand, and as they grow, they're losing money. So it's a.
Darren, from you, like I mean, you said earlier on, like you know, you work with bands like Alt J and you work with like bands like Villagers. You know, do you see, like I mean, in terms of their labels, they're talking about Infectious and Domino. You know, are those labels like, do they kind of see online as number one, or is it still, do you still kind of see things like radio and say print in terms of marketing and kind of spreading a band's reach? Is online, like, is it playing such an important part now that's number one?
I mean, I think Infectious, who I've worked with for about a year now, see online as leading. And Infectious are quite proud of the fact that on most of their releases, the sales are also way, way higher in a digital sense. You know, like Old J for a long time was about 60 to 70% digital. We're in a market that, for all the talk of digital against CD, is normally like 30 to 35% digital in the UK. You know, I don't know about stateside or whatever. And I think that's, you know, reflective of the fact that we, you know, Infectious as a label put a huge emphasis on the online side. I mean, I think generally it's kind of, you know, these things do hang in balance, and I've always been keen to point out, because I've been asked to speak about the Alt J campaign a couple of times now because it's doing very well, and I think, you know, what I'm always keen to stress is that it's all part of one big puzzle, and you know, I'm just one bit of a very well-oiled machine, you know, that has worked well because we've got, you know, great plugger, great press people, and it all fits together, and all those things kind of work in concert with one another. You know, whether it's the gigging that, you know, like Nick Holroyd, who was just on here, he's Alt J's agent, so, you know, the gigs that they all contribute to it. You know, the online is the pickup to help, you know, retain the fans and communicate with them, but you're getting the press, the online press. You know, they're all parts of that picture. But I think what I like now is that certainly around the online side, with pretty much all the people I work with, I mean, it's more or less a caveat of me working with them, is that they understand the importance of the online side and they try and engage with it more. Like, if you're an artist that sort of stands there shrugging and goes, don't get it, then I'm probably not going to want to work with you because we're just not going to get along.
Are we finding much of that? I mean, I'm thinking about a piece I read at the start of the week on Louder Than War. Some artist whose name I can't remember was kicking off about Kickstarter and funded yourself kind of campaigns, and he was kind of going on about, I don't see the point in this. Like, why should I give a reward? Why should I have my fans sitting in the studio who each paid €200 each to do that while I mix my final record? Do we still see kind of like resistance from artists to new initiatives like that?
It's funny actually you say that, because I was going to say that when we were talking about this before. Everyone talks about the labels in that conversation, but it's kind of funny if you look at Spotify particularly. Like, over the last 12 months, the biggest dramas around Spotify have not been labels, it's been artists. And there's a different conversation about what artists are being paid by their labels, because some, like Beggars, went on record saying, actually, we split 50-50, so Spotify revenue, the artist gets half, whereas others, very, you know, it's all, no one discusses it and things like that. But yeah, I mean, I think certainly in my experience, it's like a big thing that people don't address, is that often the labels are really pro now, because the labels have been there and had the kicking with other artists over the years, and now they're all wise to it and they're getting much more proactive. The artists, on the other hand, you still get a lot of artists with very much of a regressive attitude like that, and I find that there's more artists that are kind of problematic in that area than there are labels, just from what I've seen. And, you know, you look around the general, like I said with Spotify, you know, whether it's John Hopkins or one of those was grumbling about his payments. I mean, there's a litany of these people doing this. So yeah, I think artists, certainly there is a faction of artists where they're definitely not wanting to do this, and I think they also buy into a lot of the rumour and the whisper, you know, so all the blogs go on about how Spotify don't
Steve
pay.
fucking Albini, you know, I mean, I think Steve Albini and that stupid post from 20 years ago still has a lot to play in terms of how artists regard new innovations.
Yeah, exactly. So.
I have a big bee in my bonnet, as anyone knows about Steve Albini's post from 20 years ago. Moving on, you know, there's something that kind of like Darren said there about the fact that, you know, online is now seeing, the technology side is now seeing it's just part of the game plan. If it's not part of your game plan, you're not at the races, you know. Have you come across any situations where, like, you've seen really, really clever uses of kind of like online and technology in terms of raising a band's profile or pushing a band forward in the last 12 months, say? I mean, aside from the ones we've all heard, we all know about, like you mentioned SoundCloud earlier on, smart moves.
I think Mrs. Mister had a really cool campaign. They're a band that put up a song on their Tumblr, and they keep a really active Tumblr of cool images and GIFs and all the stuff that really works well on Tumblr. And they're basically a band that was born on Tumblr. And so they partnered with Tumblr to release their EP and sort of put out songs like periodically along with the stream of images. And they're a band, I feel, that really knew who they were and knew who their audience was, and picked a technology and a partner and a rollout strategy that was native to their DNA as a band. And I think that that's the most important thing, really, is just figuring out who you are and who you want to be and how you want people to perceive you, and to present the most clear package possible that is conducive to sharing, obviously, like Tumblr is, but you know, to present like a really refined image of yourself. And so I think that's a great example. I think SoundCloud, this guy Lee Martin, who was at SoundCloud for years, who just left to do some more custom stuff, did all these really great custom campaigns with Manchester Orchestra, where you had to like put together a puzzle and it would unlock their album stream. He did some stuff for Cut Copy for Foo Fighters, and he would create these really beautiful, innovative executions that really spoke to the artwork or where the band was going, the direction. And I think that as long as you're presenting yourself in the best light possible and allowing your fans to share and listen to your music, then you're doing well.
Who was the artist that did that little like geo treasure hunt around
That's what
London?
I was going to say, yeah.
Oh, it was...
Was that was Jörgen Fark? No, that wasn't.
no, it was...
Augmented reality. They were dropping albums on physical spaces, and then you could, you know, see through the viewfinder on your smartphone. No, I've actually walked on top of an album, and you could take it from the physical world into the digital world and download that album. Then, so you.
The fact that we can't remember the band says a lot about that campaign, though.
Yeah, I was just about to say though, like I have a massive issue with this stuff, because I would put to you guys that like I like Lee Martin's work. I think Lee's an incredibly smart guy, but I don't think Lee's campaigns necessarily moved the needle a great deal for those bands. Like, no disrespect to Lee, Lee is an incredibly smart guy, but Foo Fighters were going to sell a shitload of records whether Lee was involved or not. Yeah. And I see so many of these things come around where artists just jump on any new service to try and have a piece of press to run. So then they run press going, we've done this thing and we've stuck albums. Like, to me, that augmented reality all around, that sounds like shit. Like, I don't want to do that. Yeah. I mean, it was like with Alt J, we kicked against that we just put the whole record on SoundCloud. And the reason we did it is because I don't want any of you to jump through hoops to hear my band. I just want you to find it and hear it and make a decision on it. And it feels like at some point, everyone got really drunk on gimmickry and rolling out these big, crazy, silly ideas. And I still see it now, and I'm so fucking tired of it.
Well, you can see where those come about in the marketing meeting. It's like, it's you in the meeting, and then their product manager, and then maybe the band's manager, and we want to make a really big stink. But I totally agree with you. Why make people jump through hoops? Does it make you like the record anymore? I don't know.
No.
I mean, you could just premiere it on the Hype Machine, or you could premiere it on NPR. That's pretty much it. As far as like high-profile album premiere placements, you know, you're getting one great record a week, and NPR's doing 2 or 3. And
the other person in that meeting would be the 19-year-old intern, and they say, "What's next?" And he says, "Foursquare." Right. Do a Foursquare. You know, we got to make up a Foursquare.
I mean, I have to be honest. You know, from my side of it, the confession is that certainly in the year kind of 2010 through to the 2011, when I was the head of digital marketing at PS. I was that guy. I was totally guilty of sitting there going, right, what can we do? Let's just think up some gimmick, because that will be the marketing thing. And then I considered it a win if I marketed it and people like Music Ally wrote about it and stuff like that. And of course, that's all bullshit, because that's not where the music fans are. And what I realized was all I was doing was marketing it to my other peers within my group. So I'd have like, you know, you'd be hearing from other people who do the same job as you going, yeah, great job. And it's like, that's not the fans.
Do you think a lot of that gimmickry was, but would have been social media kind of like driven as well? The fact that this was something you kind of tweet out, you put on Facebook and drive that it suddenly became like that attention economy. That was the currency people were after, rather than true music fans.
I think, yeah. I mean, it's, you know, it's the jumping through hoops bit that I take issue with. If you can build something that is inherently there and you know people can access and enjoy and all those kinds of things, great. But you know, I mean, I quite liked what Beggars did with the XX's album, where they tied in with Microsoft. And I don't know if you guys saw this, but basically it was like they gave the song to one person, or the stream of the album, and then this visual thing on the band's website just showed you where it had been shared, and you were able to watch kind of the journey of this album as it got shared all globally. And it was kind of nice to look at. But the point was that they didn't really overstate what it was there to do. It was just a nice thing to have while you listen to the album stream. And they weren't pushing it as like hot new technical idea. It was just good, but it didn't make you know, it wasn't based on you going, if you download this app and go and do this and da-da-da-da-da, you'll hear our album. It was just kind of a complementary thing to the release and hearing what was going on. And I kind of like that, because it wasn't just saying to people, go over here, do this, do that, and now you can hear our record.
I think there's a difference, a slight difference, because I don't like to jump through hoops either, but between established artists and unknown artists. An unknown artist, there's no way you want to make people work to hear your music. No. But you take someone like Block Party, who had been away for a few years and did a sort of a campaign of unlocking songs and sort of that, maybe a little more effective, because you've already got that core fan base that's looking for something to do.
Yeah, I mean, but that didn't make me listen to their record either. Like, I saw what they did and the unlock stuff and the Facebook thing and all of that. And it was nice, but it didn't make me jump on that by way of engaging with the release anymore. I mean, it is horses for courses. I'm not every man, and certainly I'm 37, and as you skew lower in demographics, kids will engage with stuff far more than people like me, because I'm old and cynical.
It would have increased visibility on what they're doing, I think, though. So it would have got people talking about them again, and it would have maybe brought new fans to the game as well, whereby it would have you would have told the old fans about got them back on the scene again, but also people may not have heard of them before, and then it would have kind of brought their attention to Block Party as well.
To some extent I agree, but I don't know. Like, I think with other things, it's kind of like, I mean, again with Alt J and with a lot of my artists, people try so hard to find the clever idea. They miss the nuts and bolts. And the nuts and bolts, like with Alt J, we run remarketing on their YouTube channel. So if any of you go and watch an Alt J video, then at some point when you go back to YouTube, you'll probably get served a pre-roll for their album. And likewise, if you visit the website or the YouTube channel, you get banner ads served. And it's just to drive awareness. And it's basic rules of marketing, like the kind of rule of 7. Like, if you see my band's ads, or just anything about my band 7 times, then I've pretty much got them imprinted on your brain. You know who they are and what their album is and things like that. And that's the first step to kind of winning you over, which all sounds a little bit insidious, I know, but that's marketing, and that's how it's done. And I think it's, those things I think are really effective. They work really well in driving awareness among people that have no idea, or might have seen mention of it, or maybe they just heard that they've got the Mercury nomination, so they go and look at the website, watch a video. And we're just doing that to just gently push that thing and not be overly aggressive. But I would argue that those kinds of things are more effective and far more long-term as a way of reaching people and communicating the message that you want to hear, without the kind of unlock this and do that and share this and... You know what I mean?
It's almost like we're back to that. It's a team been developing over the course of these 4 panels here about the long-term game. The fact that if you want a long-term game, don't be dealing in short-term gimmicks. Don't be doing a big tour right now and just thinking about how much money you're getting in from this. Don't do a campaign with a brand who don't suit you. That maybe is the case. You think that the tech in some ways has matured, and the way music industry is approaching technology has matured. You're talking about the fact that when you were in PSC, you were the gimmick boy. And that's kind of moved on, but you're kind of seeing now it hasn't kind of worked. You're seeing it from the kind of point of view of kind of so the analytics is becoming a big game. Do you think tech has matured, and 2, is there kind of a natural attrition rate when it comes to kind of stuff that we're moving away from kind of certain kind of ways of doing it, and now we're kind of going, streaming is cool, we're all in this game now, or we're waiting to see what comes next?
I think everything is accelerated right now. I mean, I think discovery alone is accelerated. Once everyone sort of has found out about a band, the bloggers and the influencers have all moved on looking for the next band. And I think the same thing happens with these gimmicks. You mentioned YouTube. There were a couple of really good YouTube campaigns this past year. There's a Swedish artist called I Am I, Who Am I think? Yeah. And just put up a lot of very ambiguous, mysterious videos, and no one knew who it was. And that was effective, and people started following each video more and more. There was a bass artist called Unknown, who was putting up just videos, and the song titles are like number 1, number 2, number 6, whatever. And that's been pretty effective. People have started catching on to that. But now I've heard, I think Ben Gibbard is doing a YouTube stream of his album next week as a premiere. Who else? Taken by Trees just did their whole album as YouTube images, and you could actually stream the whole album by putting a YouTube playlist together. And we're already at the point where I think the YouTube playlist as an album premiere might already be sort of tired. So again, everything is accelerating much more quickly, including gimmicks and including, discovery.
I mean, in that kind of way. I mean, have you seen anything, or is there anything you are kind of hearing about in terms of a next tech jump forward, or is it a case of Jesus Christ, Jim? Don't be talking about what comes next. We're dealing right now. What's happening right now?
I mean, I think from my side, I was involved in a discussion recently about the kind of impact of things like Spotify, and I think just as I mentioned earlier that physical sales are still the bulk of sales if you look at if you can get a chart breakdown from the official chart company, you see the percentages of everything in the chart, and pretty much everything sells like 70% CDs. There's exceptions, as I said, with Infectious particularly, they sell high.
Didn't the Mumfords record come in at 50-50?
Could well have done.
Yeah.
So you still sell a lot of physical, and just in the same way as like everyone fixates on Spotify and streaming media, in terms of the actual penetration of popular culture, it's just not even off the starting block. It's kind of like when your nan tells you that she's streaming shit on Spotify, it's probably broken through. But when we're sat around talking about it, we're like the people that we just inherently, by virtue of what we do for a living, are going to get to it first. So I think in that respect, we're some way off the things that even now are kind of going to really get somewhere. Just as when Napster touched down 10 years ago, it's taken this long for the whole notion of a digital download and the world of digital and piracy and everything else to be kind of fully understood and leveraged in a way that we understand that it's just about inspiring people to do better, in terms of making access more convenient and things like that. But in terms of the next generation of stuff coming along, who knows? I mean, I think convenience currently is the absolute king. Convenience drives everything, which is why Neil Young is kind of touting around some fucking file format that is supposed to be incredibly good. No one's going to buy it because it means you've got to rebuy your catalog in his format. So right there, no. Then you've got to buy a music player that will play it. Again,
and speakers too, right?
Yeah, the whole bit. And it's just, he doesn't fundamentally understand that accept
Neil Young's mad.
Yeah, so it's a case in point. Convenience drives everything, but it's a shame because I think there are some great things out there. I've seen some very interesting ideas. I really like the Gwilym Gold kind of album. This guy called Gwilym Gold, I don't know if any of you know him, put an album out, but he released a version of it as an iPhone and iPad. It's kind of an app, but the app doesn't really do a lot. It's not like a thing where you play Space Invaders while you listen to him. But basically the album is it never plays the same way twice because things change within it. And it's a really fascinating experience. And it's not the realm of kind of extremely left field IDM electronica things where, Brian Eno's been doing that for ages and everyone's just shrugging and it's just more kind of wallpaper sound, whatever. But with his, with Gwilym's album, it's actually a proper album with singing and everything else, and it's generative. And I think as a concept, that's really, really interesting. Will it break out and go kind of beyond that? I don't know, but I do think we're kind of overdue a shift in how we consume music, full stop. Think the CD just turned 30, I think, a couple of weeks ago. And there's really not been a format that's kind of, we're now on the digital download, but even the MP3 is kind of long in the tooth.
I mean, The Guardian are pushing for a mini disc revival, which I'm all for.
Yeah, totally up for that. That'll start at radio stations first, who are the only people who've still got mini disc. But
I mean, so much of my consumption is just on blogs and on SoundCloud. I don't subscribe to Spotify. I don't have tons of music in my iTunes library because of the nature of what I do, which is trying to find new music all the time. All the time I have to dedicate to listening to music is just listening to what's in my SoundCloud feed, reading a bunch of blogs, looking on the Hype Machine. So I feel like the killer format for me is already here. I have everything I need to discover the bands that I'm looking for. I don't know where they are, but that's part of the fun.
Yeah.
I think there's a lack of fulfillment starting to show up in real music fans. I mean, we're talking about a smaller percentage of the audience. We're not talking about the people that are going to go out and buy the Mumfords record. But, I mean, I know kids that don't own turntables, but they still go out and buy the vinyl because they get all the records for free. They can only go to the show once or twice a year, or once every 2 or 3 years the band might come through. But they want to have something tactile. They want to engage. They want to support the artist somehow. And that's the only way they can do it. And I think there's just having an MP3 is not that special, really.
Yeah.
And I think there is a yearning for something a bit more special to come back into music ownership or engagement.
Could you subscribe to an artist's fan club and get stuff early and then get, something new every month? And I feel like...
Stone's Throw and Domino have been doing that, haven't they? Via Trip FM, isn't it?
Yeah, with the Trip FM subscriptions.
Yeah, I think for a label like Domino or Fool's Gold or Mad Decent, for example, who are really always, putting out new releases, it makes a lot of sense, and you kind of build up this loyalty with a label. And I think that labels themselves are brands. They're developing the brands of the individual bands that are on the label, but I trust what Stone's Throw puts out or what Mad Decent puts out, and I'm willing to subscribe to that, to support them, and also to feel like I have some stock in what they're doing, some sort of ownership. But I don't think that satisfies what Dev's talking about, which is this desire to own something, to own a T-shirt, to own a record, a piece of the band. For me, I lose everything, so I can't manage that.
Brendan?
I think Drip FM is a really clever development, or Drip. Is Drip or Trip FM?
Trip FM.
Trip FM.
Right. I think that is a clever development and does address some of that very well.
I think it basically fulfills a niche. I mean, I think even, is it like it's never going to be like the next big thing, but it doesn't have to be.
Yeah.
And I think it's
super fans.
and it caters for a niche, and the niche is the kind of super hardcore.
Yeah.
And I think for people like
and
Stone
for
Throw,
labels
it's
like
great.
Stone's Throw and for Mad Decent, there's enough of that niche there to kind of like exploit. It took us 30 minutes for the P words we mentioned. You mentioned piracy there, and if we were having any kind of panel discussion like this over the last 10 years, the piracy would be high up the agenda. Now, to my mind, and this is where I can act as devil's advocate, it just doesn't seem. I know it hasn't gone away. It's like it's a Jerry Adams moment here. It hasn't gone away. It's still there. But is it part of the game anymore, or is it kind of like the dark side that no one really mentions?
I think it's there. I mean, I suppose because I'm working with the artist directly. I mean, obviously, piracy is a massive pain in the arse if it happens, if an album leaks. So, if the record isn't available anywhere, and then it leaks.
Leak, right? Don't they all leak
On purpose.
Well, no.
I speak with artist reps all the time that sort of write it off as, we know there's this percentage of the audience that's going to get the record for free, and they'll probably get it before it comes out, and we can't think about that. We have to think about the people that are going to buy it and how we're going to tour and make money and do all the other stuff.
I mean, certainly on my side, I actually don't think records leak anywhere near as much as they used to. They used to be really endemic with 3-month upfront leaks and disasters like that. These days, I'm struggling to think. I mean, of all the campaigns I've worked on over the years, in the last 2 years, I genuinely can't think of an album leaking more than a week ahead of release. And a week ahead of release, we always, inevitably an artist will put the album up for stream a week ahead of release. It's just what you do. The XX did it. We did it with Alt J and stuff like that. One thing I would say actually with Alt J was we put the entire album up on SoundCloud a week before release as a stream for everyone to hear, because we were kind of confident that the record was sort of good enough that you would get it and want, as Dev said, to invest. And it was, it wasn't a decision taken lightly, because SoundCloud don't pay you per stream. So in theory, we could have gone to Spotify and said, all right, we'll give it to you a week up front, and know that every time you guys listened, some money is coming back. But the decision was made to put it on SoundCloud, because that's where Alt J had kind of built themselves. They'd put a 4-track EP up, and that's where everyone had heard them and everything else. Now, in putting that up, we drove a really healthy number of pre-orders to iTunes and Amazon in that week. And it's still a point of debate as to whether, for the label, maybe more money would have been made by doing that than if it had been on Spotify. Because even though SoundCloud didn't pay per stream, the amount of the CDs and copies sold would have generated a significant amount. But the interesting thing is that we've never taken it down, and the album is still up in full, and it has been since mid-May. And it's the far away the primary driver of clicks through to iTunes and Amazon. So it drives more clicks than any ads, anything else we've done, and it certainly hasn't hurt the band, because they're selling really well, they're doing great, they've got the Mercury nomination, everything is going really well for
But
them.
it's worth noting that's unorthodox to leave the stream up. Like, for example, your streams go up for a week and then they come down, right? And the idea is people think that having a stream would cannibalize sales, but here's a salient example of how that's not true.
I think people want to try before they buy though as well. So if
Yeah, completely. I mean, I think it's having faith in your product. And I mean, it does raise this issue that no one wants to really talk about, which is really true, which is if the record is good enough, then it will sell. So it's kind of like if you've got a really mediocre record, don't expect that stream to necessarily do as well for you. In the case of Alt J, first and foremost, that whole campaign's done well because it's a very, very, very good record. And so it's done great from that. But yeah, in terms of leaving it up, it's done us no harm at all, I don't think. We've managed to keep a momentum up that I've not seen on many album campaigns, because historically, and if you look at any album campaign, it will, week one, a common practice is usually to front load the campaign, usually to impress radio. So when you put the album out, it goes straight into the top 20. Then radio go, oh great, then they support it more. And then you hope that the ball keeps rolling. Usually what happens is that you might get that, but usually it's kind of, you get a second week quite a big drop off. It's not uncommon now to see things go from top 5 to mid-30s in 7 days, just all up front and then out. Yeah. Now, Elkjay, we've managed to keep it kind of within the top 40 since May, and I can't remember the last time I've managed that with an artist, there's a huge amount of conjecture as to whether the SoundCloud stream, for example, contributes to that. God knows, to be honest. There are so many things going on.
That's the thing. It's very hard to kind of like work out where it's coming from. That's where data comes into it. And like Brendan, you can kind of talk a bit about this, because like in the last couple of years, in every area from sport to music, it suddenly seems like data is the new sex god. That everyone wants a bit. There's so much data out there that mining into it. Maybe talk a bit before we throw it out to the audience for questions. Is data overplayed? Are we placing too much importance in data? Are we listening to the geeks who've got data on their mind too much, or can data actually work for a band, and in what way?
Yeah, well, I think data is king, and I think it's been well documented that the music industry has been suffering because they have a lack of data and have been having a lack. You could, back in the day, you could understand where your markets were by understanding how many, X amount of CDs that you were shifting in each city or in each country, and right now they're obviously seeing a decrease in that, but they're also having a much tougher time in understanding where their popularity is and how people and where people are consuming that content. So, we've seen it in other industries where people have kind of had the big data play and these data insights, and you can see the returns. It's very quantitative type thing that you're doing, that you can see market sales going up as a result of more data insights and more data analysis. So I see no reason why it can't help in the music industry as well. If you can understand where exactly your fans are, what content they're consuming and how often they're consuming it, then you can kind of use that data to actually formulate better plans to actually get at these guys and serve them more content.
What do you think, Darren? Because back in the day in Sony, you'd access to data, you would have sharp returns and all that. Is this just suddenly the case that there's more stuff out there, you need that kind of thing, and are the tools there to I suppose, data mine properly to the benefit of your artist?
I'm basically I get laughed at all the time because I'm like Captain Stats. I just spend half of my job is chewing through analytics. For me, it's funny because you say there's like almost a lack of it. I'd say at the moment there's so much that the trick is being able to navigate through the stats that actually count. And I think particularly if you do an export of Facebook Insights from the pages, like they'll give you some data in the user interface of your Facebook page, but if you actually export a spreadsheet, then the massive plethora of data that's available is revealed. But trying to navigate through that can be incredibly hard. And I've actually made it, since I started Motive Unknown, I've kind of switched and sought out different tool sets that allow me more easily to cut through that, to try and present data back to labels and artists and managers that has genuine meaning.
There is a lot of data out there, but I think there is a lack of actionable data. So as you said, you've got your Facebook Insights, and you can see how many people have been on your Wikipedia page and tweeted about you, but that's periphery data. So there's a lack of real hardcore actionable data that you can use to...
It's really tricky, because I think the problem with all the data that's collected is that, I really remember at PS we used a service called BuzzDeck for a while, and it's a bit like Next Big Sound, and all these other things that do band metrics. And the problem we found with all of them was that they don't provide every single last piece of information about your campaign. And so, like as a quick example, I was working on the C6 Steve campaign at the time, and we had all the stuff going on in the graph, and he was going to be on Jules Holland, and we were kind of like, okay, so let's put a flag on that date of like he was on Jules Holland. Here's all your YouTube views and fan growth and da 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 da. He went on Jules Holland, and this thing absolutely spiked. And we were like, fucking hell, that was amazing. And then it turned out that the reason it had spiked, when we actually dug through and talked to other people, was nothing to do with Jules Holland. It was that Jack White had stuck his video on the front of Third Man Records in the US because he'd just signed him. Now, we were blissfully unaware of any of this. And the problem with that is that it was possible for us to look at this and go, oh wow, Jules Holland is like next level for pushing your artist, and it wasn't. It was something else entirely. So until these things literally pull in every last thing going on within your campaign, it's incredibly easy to make a kind of 2 and 2 equals 5 conclusion and get it very, very wrong. And hence now, when I'm looking at stats, I actually try and pare it down to things that are much more simple and much more kind of followable. So like with Facebook, it's very much tracking engagement and how are you engaging fans. I don't care about your total likes. I want to know how many are actually engaging with you, because those are the only ones that count. And following that, and also tracking things like unlikes, which is the big stat that no one really looks at on Facebook. It's great if you do a post and you go, okay, we've got 100 new likes. If you've got 200 unlikes, then you're in reverse. And I've seen this on fashion brands particularly. You know, they'll do this and post, and you lose more fans than you gain, because people look at it and go, oh, I forgot I like that brand. I don't wear them anymore. Unlike, and stuff like that. So it's very, very tricky with data to navigate through.
Cool. I'm going to throw out to the audience some questions, because I'm just looking at my watch and realizing we've kind of, as normal, talked way over. So before we throw it out to the audience, I mean, maybe, like, you know, it's this weekend, it's all been about like 10 years, what we've learned and all that. 10 years, let's forward shift 10 years, you know. What's the word easier around? Futurescape. Like, what or some other stupid word that's made up in the spot, driven by too much caffeine this weekend. 10 years from now, you know, where do you think, what the position will be regarding tech and music? Will something new have emerged again? You know, will our grannies all be kind of moved on from Spotify, and they'll actually be kind of going like, well, you know, Alt J's third album, you know, the one that sounds like Muse, you can do this kind of jigsaw with it on an app. I mean, where will we be? You know what I mean? Like, what do you think? Like, I mean, given the fact that 10 years ago we couldn't predict where we are right now, I know it's an unfair question, but what have you seen? What trends have you seen? Because you're all smart people. You know, you wouldn't be on this panel if you weren't. You're all smart people. So where do you see things going in the next 10 years? Will, start with Will.
Hovercrafts.
What?
Hovercraft.
Okay, hovercraft. Right.
I think it would be. I like the surprise of not knowing what's happening in the future, and I don't.
That's a cop out.
And I don't pretend to be able to predict the future. I hope that somehow people have continued to be able to make money in the music industry, and I hope that there are more opportunities for artists to do that. I think, like, basically, I run a music blog. Dev works for Hype Machine. I think that's created a lot of jobs and a lot of revenue and a lot of opportunities for artists, and I hope that that's still in existence, but I hope that there's something else and a few other things out there that are ways for artists to make money at what they're doing, make a living.
Cool. Brendan?
I think the streaming services are going to have a really interesting couple of years. I mean, I think that's a problem that hasn't been solved yet. If you look at dig into the numbers of Spotify, as I was saying earlier, they're actually losing more money than they're making each year. So they're making more and more money each year, but they're actually losing more and more money each year as well. So I mean, I don't know if that's a sustainable model long term in terms of their revenue generation. So I think there's a few more kinks and bumps in the whole streaming service model yet to come. So that'll be an interesting space.
Cool. Dev?
The conversation that we're having in-house at Hype Machine at the moment mostly centers around where the conversation about music is going. Like, we've noticed Tumblr has become, it was mentioned earlier in the panel, and a lot of artists I spoke with earlier today during the speed sessions were not on Tumblr, and I said Tumblr is a good place to be now. So we're looking at how we can maybe track engagement on Tumblr and places like that. Mobile, obviously, is another place where the conversation is sort of happening, or how will it happen. The thing for me right now is there's a lot of broadcasting of, here's what I'm listening to right now on Spotify, and it's being shot out on Facebook, and a lot of people just, it's very kind of narcissistic almost. It's like, I just want everyone to know what I'm listening to. And I think we're going to hopefully circle back to more interesting ways to present music in general and what we're listening to in playlists and mixtapes and things like that, and maybe get back to a bit more of a conversation about it, rather than just, here's my playlist, here's my stuff, and blah, blah, blah. I mean, conversation has really, comments are down on music blogs across the board, for example. That kind of engagement is dying out.
Okay, great. Finally, Darren. You've had longer to think than anyone else, so come on.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think the streaming argument's an interesting one. I mean, I would say, your point about the losses growing with Spotify, the losses are actually narrowing. The losses are growing on paper, but they're narrowing in terms of, as they get bigger, their losses actually get smaller because they're converting more premium users. So, but it's whether they can reach the point on the horizon where it actually flips and it's kind of, we are genuinely making money. The problem I think you have with streaming music services is that when you introduce a platform like streaming media that's ultra convenient and everything else, it's going to be really quite hard to take it away again. So even if Spotify were to collapse, something will probably fill the void. I think ultimately the whole music like water theory may yet bear out, where you kind of pay for music like you do your electricity and your water, and it's just something you have continual access to.
We don't pay for for water over here. We're not going to pay for water, are we? That's an in-joke, like last year's Vincent Brown joke.
Yeah, so like your electricity that you pay for, or your gas, or take your pick. So yeah, and whether you do that, and then kind of, you know, cross-stitching what Dev was saying, whether it's then about how you consume the music, and it's not less kind of what's providing that music, but how you're enjoying it and sharing it with people, you know, and the access is kind of set out. But I think that business model is probably got to survive, because I'm not sure what the alternative is. You know, if that crashes and burns, whether there's something will fill it. But you just never know, you know, things shift, there's a constant kind of swing, and you can't necessarily predict like 10 years down the line we'll be here. I would like to think that streaming services will probably survive in one way or another, and that they will become kind of more akin to this, you know, everyone paying a flat rate. Whether it will, we'll see, because there's some argument there's a kind of market cap there, and that, you know, only X number of people would ever do that, and others would just flatly not bother, but time will tell.
You know, I read a very short think piece a while back where someone pointed out how the idea of making a shitload of money in the music industry is a very 20th century phenomenon. Like, for hundreds of years, artists did not make a lot of money, you know, and then all of a sudden the recording industry cropped up around the late sort of 20s, 30s, somewhere in there. Then the 50s and 60s, everyone started making money, and then no one's kind of making a lot of money anymore. So is this, if you look at the whole long scope of the thing, was this just a little momentary blip where we had the Led Zeppelins and the U2s and stuff like that?
Wow.
Do you know who the killer analyst was that said that? Mick Jagger. It was genuine. Mick Jagger was quoted as saying, actually, there was just 15 years, and it wasn't even like the start of the 60s, because that's when all the managers were screwing the bands, like Brian Epstein. And
we've had a beautiful moment here in that the whole Hard Working Class Heroes convention has just circle has been circled, because on Friday at the very first panel, Jeffrey from Arts and Crafts was talking about the fact that, like, if the minute you're in a band and you've got you're doing something and you're asking people for money, be it as a ticket or whatever, you're in the music business, and you've just beautifully brought it back to the fact that, well, we're just in this blip of a couple of decades, you know. Beautiful. I think that's a really good way to end it and throw the questions out to the audience. And if you've got some questions, please put your hand up. Please note that this year's Hard Working Class Heroes convention has featured the best questions of any Hard Working Class Heroes convention so far. There's been no fucking stupid questions about bands and how we listen to your demo. So please bear that in mind when you ask your question.
No one's going to ask a question.
Yeah. Garrett in the front. Preemptive strike.
Yeah, I think it's really mainly for Soundwave, because I'd seen you give your pitch last May, and I think you guys could probably help on this. Recently, you've probably noticed it, obviously everyone has a Facebook, that Deezer now has a stream. You've listened. When you look at an artist's page, as listen, and my friends were listening to New Headers album, and they listened to it through Deezer, through the registered Facebook account. In that regard, how does that sit with you guys? I mean, that's not Spotify. That's a community-based, kind of like what Soundwave is going to be. And I mean, do you think this is a positive or negative? Because not all streaming services are good. I mean, Deezer were French, and then they stopped people from listening to it, and then they're just like Spotify, they have to buy licensing and stuff. And then because it's related to Facebook, I mean, is that a good thing, or is it?
I think it's good. I think it shows that people have an inherent curiosity to know what others are listening to, but I don't think it affects us negatively, because I think we sit agnostically above the streaming services as a point of kind of music discovery, and then where you stream will be it's irrelevant for us. I also think that, like, housing this information on Facebook isn't necessarily the correct place to have it. That's why we're trying to create our own separate community or place where you can store this information. There's too much noise right now. You go on your Facebook and you've got brands trying to hawk you stuff. You've got friends talking. You've got pictures. You've got all sorts of everything going on. It's too crowded and too noisy. So I think what we're hoping to do is take music off of that wall and put it in its own rightful place. You know, and you can, when you want to discover new music, you go to your music discovery place, and when you want to talk to your friends, you go to your social network. You know, so I think it proves that people are curious, but it's overall it's a good thing.
Cool. Next question. Wow, one question. Great. Okay, I think that's no one else got any question? Have we basically talked at you for the last 3/4 of an hour and explained everything? We have. Fantastic. And with that, that's it. That's great. That's the final Hard Working Class Heroes Convention panel. So thanks hugely to the panelists, Darren, Brendan, Will, Dev.